Alright, from the homework on page 249, section 3.6, number 4, we have k of r equals -1, where r is less than or equal to the value of -2. For letter I, we are asked to find a formula for its reflection through the vertical axis. What this simply means is basically I'm going to replace I have k r to -1. All I have to do for this is replace my input value, in this case my r, for its negation, or a -r. And since there's no r input value over on the other side, no variable, it just remains -1. So that's all I have to do for part 1. Now let's go ahead and take a look at that graph, because, or let's go to part I guess. It's part double I guess I should say. Refers to give the domain of its reflection through the vertical axis. Well, our domain was given as r is less than or equal to -2. Well, since we negated r here, we also have to negate it here when we do through the process. So it becomes -r is less than or equal to -2. Remember, I got to put this into positive notation, so I need to divide it out by a -1. And remember, so obviously -r divided by -1 is a positive r, but remember, whenever I divide or multiply by a negative number, when I'm dealing with inequalities, I need to flip the sign. So this becomes r is greater than or equal to the value of 2. Now let's take a look at what that looks like on our calculator. And in order to put it in our calculator, we simply have to change these k's and r's into values that my TI calculator can handle, whichever y's and x's. So my k becomes basically y equals -1. And obviously my domain here of r now becomes x. And the first part would be less than or equal to -2. And then when I do the reflection, it would be x is greater than or equal to +2. So let's take a look at what those graphs look like on the calculator. So I bring up my calculator and I'm going to plug them in. My first value obviously is y1 equals -1. And my domain of the original one was simply x is less than or equal to -2. So let's take a look at what that looks like on the graph. So there it is on the graph. Now I'm saying the reflection through the vertical axis is, from what I figured out, still has a value of -1. The only thing that changes in this case is my domain. My domain now is greater than or equal to, second test, greater than or equal to, which is option number 4, a +2. And let's see if that indeed is the reflection amongst the vertical axis. And as you can see, it is the reflection. So it's basically I would have a mirror image right down, going down the y-axis. So that indeed is the reflection through the vertical axis. And for part the third I for this, it's asked us to find a formula for its reflection through the horizontal axis. And it also tells you, recall that basically what we're going to be doing here is we're going to be manipulating the output. So in this case, if I'm dealing with, again, with the k of r, my k of r is -1, I'm actually, all I'm going to do is be negating the output. So essentially it becomes a negative k of r equals a -1. And when I do this, it ends up having, because I always want a positive value of k of r, equals a +1, because I need to divide it out both sides by -1, so I end up getting k of r equals a +1. And for part 4, or IV, I'm asked to sketch the given function, its reflection through the vertical axis, and label its reflection through the horizontal axis on one pair of axes. So I'm going to go ahead and graph this using our calculator. Remember, before I go on graphing, I got to put this into my calculator form. So my k ends up being my y value. I'll call this y3, and that's going to equal 1. So when I go to my graphing calculator to graph this, I go to y3, has a value of 1, And remember, my domain in this case does not change from the original, so it's x is going to be less than or equal to a -2. And when I go to graph all three of these on the same plane, you can see there is my original reflection across the vertical axis, and here is my new reflection across the horizontal axis, and it does work out. And that's how we end up doing homework problem number 3.6.